Wow, thank you so much for having me here. Thank you to Hope, and thank you to all of the organizers of this wonderful event. And thank you for actually taking time on a weekend to spend some time with me and to spend some time with other presenters as well. So, I was thinking about what I wanted to talk to you about today, and I am going to focus on a little bit of politics, but I also want to talk about my journey as a vegan of 20 years. I want to talk about politics and social issues, and I want to kind of talk about the Humane Party and also the future, what I envision as my future in politics, the future of the Humane Party, and how you may be able to help. Sound fair? Awesome. All right, so I'm not sure who that chubby little guy is that these two folks are holding, but the beautiful woman that you see on the right is my mother. She's from an island called Jeju Island off the tip of South Korea. And it was a very cute story because what she shared with me was that her and her friends at a very young age would find out that these military men would be on the mainland. And so they would give themselves American names based off of movie characters that they had seen. So her name was Stella. Now, what was interesting is in this picture, she was about 15 years old. And notice the way she was dressed. Isn't that amazing? I don't think these days I would see a 15-year-old girl wearing these type of clothes. And she was always dressed that way. Anyway, my father was from Washington, D.C., Maryland area, right? And he wanted to, he had also seen a movie, and it was about a military guy, and he met somebody overseas. I think it was Finding Susie Wong. I can't remember the name of the movie, but so he joined the military at a very young age and went over, and the two of them met. Now, this was a beautiful story because they barely spoke each other's language, but they obviously spoke the language of love, and they made this little guy that you see here. What's interesting is my son is in the audience, and you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference. You would think that I am showing you a picture of him, and he's just beautiful. So the reason why I wanted to show you this is because, there's no other people that love you more in the world than your parents. And I remember when I was born, they didn't know any better. And so they would feed me the way that they were culturally accustomed to feeding themselves, based on their habits, and even based off of selfishness sometimes, right? That's the way that we eat, is based on habit, tradition, culture, and selfishness. And so I would, I would start to get sick, and the two people that loved me most in the world would take me to these other human beings that were called doctors, because they read a lot and they got this piece of paper, right? And these doctors, they were medical practitioners, and that's what they did, was they practiced on me. So they would practice and poke and prod and tell me that I was allergic to grass, and they told my parents I was allergic to dogs and cats and bees and birds and dirt and, everything, basically nature. They told my parents I was allergic to nature. So it was interesting because it wasn't until I went vegan that all of my sickness went away. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to be the case for everybody, but in my experience, and this was 20 years ago, I was 30 years old. I just turned 50 in last year. I thought that I would forever just be sick and have asthma and have acne and never to be able to breathe out of my nose. And ultimately, my father passed away from cancer. My grandfather also passed away from cancer. And I ended up working at HealthNet, and when I found out that he had cancer, he told me about this. This was right before my daughter, who's in the audience, she's 13. He came and told me he had cancer, and I was working for a company called HealthNet Federal Services, and I'm going to share that with you in a minute. And I was very curious. So I started to do some research. So before I move on, how many people in this room, by show of hands, have ever heard or are familiar with the acronym ICD? I'm impressed. I am very impressed. What does ICD stand for?
I think it stands for a bunch of different things. I'm thinking of
It's okay.
something challenging disorder.
Okay, very close. Anyone else? ICD, and I'm going to give you a hint. 10. ICD 10. Say this.
They're diagnostic codes. It's what you do when you go to a hospital and they diagnose you, and that determines the reimbursement you're going to get for condition.
Okay, that is so close. I mean, basically right.
ICD-9 when I was doing
Yes, yes. Okay, the reason why I wanted to bring this up today is because I think it ties into me running for Senate. I mean, it's something that I focus on is healthcare. ICD is something that is so part of our everyday lives that when we go see a doctor, that is the way that the doctors bill our insurance companies, and to substantiate the diagnosis and the service that's going to be rendered. So ICD actually stands for International Coding of Disease. So now it's version 10. When I worked at HealthNet, it was ICD-9. So I looked it up. Now this is going to blow your mind. I looked it up, and for his diagnosis, my father, it basically was ICD-9 167 or something like that. So I didn't know what that meant, so I looked at the American Medical Association definition of ICD-9 167, and it said malignant neoplasm. So I said, okay, I know what malignant means, but what in the world is a neoplasm? So initially, I thought, when I thought of plasm, I thought of Ghostbusters and the plasma dude that comes out. But basically it means, and this is the actual definition, you can look it up yourself, unexplainable growth in a living tissue. Now let's think about that for a minute. So my father starts to feel something, and he doesn't understand it. He can't explain it. He doesn't know what it is. It's scaring the crap out of him. So he goes and he visits his doctor, and his doctor says, you know, I have a feeling I might know what it is, but let me refer you to somebody that's more expert than I am. And that medical expert says, you know, I agree with you. I can't explain it either. As a matter of fact, I'm going to bill your insurance company with a set of procedures to treat this diagnosis. I'm going to give you an MRI, I'm going to do a biopsy, I'm going to give you some pills, but I'm going to tell them that it's an unexplainable growth in a living tissue. So yeah, I diagnose you with the same thing that you came and told me that you were feeling. So that's why I am so focused on healthcare. I was so glad to be working at HealthNet at the time. So I lost him, but he was able to enjoy my daughter, and I can't imagine how proud he would be to see Liam and our newborn coming soon. So anyway, just a little bit of background. So this is the rest of my family, and they're vegan, all of them. Vegan conceived, my daughter, my son Liam, who's up there, my wife, my daughter. This is us at last Halloween dressing like the Addams Family. and Liam like, what are you guys doing? Right? My son, who is 22 years old, and he is also vegan, but he was not vegan conceived the same way that my daughter and my son soon-to-be son was. But he decided to go vegan on his own at the age of 14. Yes. And Emery is also vegan conceived, so he's been vegan while in the tummy. Now, this was a recent 4D picture. We did this last weekend. And he looks just like Liam. All right, enough about the family. And I'm a proud dad, proud husband, right? So I attended the University of California at Berkeley. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. Yeah, right around the corner. Yep, go Bears. And you know, this was a defining moment for me too, because I remember graduating from Vanden High School in Fairfield, California. I had just come from Okinawa, Japan. My father and my mother were divorced. So my father told me, Clifton, you need to come here, live with me for a year, so when you go to Cal, that's the school I want you to go to. It's a really good school. I don't have to pay as much. Out-of-state residents have to pay a ton, right? So I get here, and I go to Cal. My first day of school, I'm 17 years old. I get to the campus, and who do I see out in front of Sproul Hall? Hare Krishnas. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with Hare Krishnas, but they are a beautiful group of people, very spiritual. And I see them, and they're out in these colorful, beautiful outfits. They all have the same hairdo, probably bald. And they were just dancing and singing and playing drums and just out there. And you felt this compassionate energy as you walk up to them. And one image caught my attention in particular. And it was the image of, it was a big poster, and it was the image of a cow kneeling down, and it had a human head. And there was a human with an axe that had a cow's head. And he was about to slaughter the cow with the human head. And it was just an interesting juxtaposition of, you know, the duality between what we are eating and how we treat our fellow non-human animals. They're our brothers and sisters, right? That's the way that I feel. So I think Cal Berkeley was a turning point for me, because it was the first time somebody put that image into my head. And of course, after that, I kept saying, I'm going to be a vegetarian. Okay, vegan wasn't even in my head at the time, but I'm going to be vegetarian, and I did my best. I was one of those young 19-year-old vegetarians that would call myself a vegetarian but still eat fish, right? So I ended up going to Cal Berkeley. My junior year, I got an internship at Lehman Brothers, and that's when I knew I wanted to make some money, because they would announce how much all the brokers were making. And I got recruited out of college and worked for Payne Weber. Got my Series 7 and studied to be a stockbroker, and I ended up realizing I didn't like that, because I didn't want to cold call older ladies and say, give me all your money and I'm going to trade stocks for you. It just wasn't right. I didn't feel right doing it. So for a while there, I did focus on athletes and R&B groups and musicians and movie stars, and I ended up giving Kevin Johnson, who used to be the former mayor, I went to college with him. My uncle happened to play at that time for the Miami Dolphins. So I did pretty well, and I got into training. From there, I was recruited by Nations Bank, and I managed a $18 million consumer finance branch for Nations Bank. It was called Nations Credit Financial Services. And then from there, I went to HealthNet Federal Services, which is where I learned so much about the military healthcare system, about TRICARE. And that is the pinnacle of healthcare in the United States. And there's no difference in the way that we diagnose diseases and we treat diseases. There's no difference from the way that the military deals with that and private healthcare deals with that, right? The debate about healthcare is always about, you know, who is going to qualify for the healthcare in your family? What is your copay going to be? But no one really focuses on the fact that doctors are telling people, I don't know what I'm diagnosing you with, and I'm still going to charge you $10,000. No one is talking about that except for the Humane Party. That is ridiculous to me, and it's something that I'm very passionate about and I'm going to address. And after HealthNet Federal Services, I ended up working for Intel Corporation, which I still work for. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Intel Corporation, but Intel Corporation is very well known for making computer chips. So most of the computers that you see might have an Intel chip. If it has that other chip, what was it called, AMD? Don't go with Intel. But what I do for Intel, I think it set the foundation for me being able to get into politics and run on a compassionate platform for a compassionate political party. So my job at Intel is Senior Manager of Ethics and Legal Compliance. So my job is to ensure that all 110,000 employees around the world do their job with uncompromising integrity and following the letter and the spirit of the law. Yes, trying to. Thank you. So that's a little bit about my background. So, whether it's healthcare or financial services or finance, there's something that I think that I can bring to the table as a quote-unquote politician. And let me tell you, the reason why I became a politician, or I'm trying to be a politician, is because I'm tired of the way that politicians are treating us. So that's why I got into politics. So, 2014, I'm looking at the news. I'm realizing that we are perpetually in war, that young people that are my son's age are just dying, that my non-human animal friends are being killed by the billions, fish are being killed by the trillions. I walk around, and one thing that I'm known for, and my family can attest to this, is that I have a tremendous soft heart for homeless people, and no matter who it is, I will buy someone a meal. I won't necessarily give them money, but I will sit and talk with you and buy you a meal, and depending on the situation, I'll go to the bank and give you some money. I mean, I was looking at the state of affairs of the United States, and I said, you know what? I started to look at the Republican Party and the Democrats the same as one party. Like when I look back at history and the presidents that I can remember, all the way back from Nixon to Carter to Reagan to Clifton, to the Bushes and to Obama, I never really sensed any real change. And so I thought about starting my own political party, but I was like, I wish I could find a party that was vegan and that really cared about the planet and that put their money where their mouths were and that ran vegan candidates, so that way we can truly tell people how it is and not overcomplicate healthcare and use our own logic and sense of, just our gut instincts and about our own health. And lo and behold, I did a search and I found the Humane Party. And it turned out that they were looking for volunteers, particularly they were looking for a CEO at that time. So I couldn't believe my eyes, and I started reading about it, and lo and behold, they were not a single issue party. They started to, I was reading the platform, balanced budget, equality for all, eliminating systems and practices that create profit motives to go to war, eliminating the systems that are designed to incarcerate people and to keep them incarcerated, eliminating the death penalty. Just things that I believed in. I'm like, wow. So I wrote them and I volunteered, and about 2 months later, someone got in touch with me and said, I'd like for you to interview with the board. I interviewed with the board, and I got the gig as the CEO at the time of the Humane Party. I was so happy. And I remember the first thing that I did as CEO was I eliminated pay for the CEO. Because in my eyes, I thought that a political organization, an all-volunteer organization, no matter if the board wanted to pay me, I was already making some good money at Intel, I thought that it would be more pure if we can develop an organization based on volunteers where the leader of that organization is also putting his money where his mouth is and walking the talk and talking the walk, right? So that was the first thing I did. So now we have Brandy, who is our CEO. We're all volunteer, and that's what I love about the Humane Party. So this foil, you have to forgive me. For some reason at Intel we call slides foils. I don't get it, but you may hear me say that. Please forgive me if I say things that you don't understand. This slide here, I wanted to title it Modern Day Civil War. And there was a Pulitzer Prize winning author named James McPherson. And he wrote that the Civil War started because of uncompromising differences between the free and slave states over the power of the national government to prohibit slavery, especially in the territories that had not yet become states. So when Abe Lincoln captured the election in 1860, and at that time he was the very first Republican president on a platform that actually pledged to keep slavery out of the territories. There were 7 of the Deep South slave states that seceded and formed a new nation. And we all know what that nation was. It was the Confederate States of America, right? So in my view, given that what we are seeing going on with non-human animals, right? I mean, by all accounts, there are, I want to say, about 10,000 federally sanctioned slaughterhouses in the United States, meaning that they're federally inspected. And each of these, if we average about 5,000 for each, you're looking at about 5.5 million people that are legally allowed to kill. And the rest of us are not used to killing, unless we're going fishing or something like that. That's killing. But on the scale that we've seen and the types of things that we see happen to chickens and cows and turkeys and pigs, it is, in my opinion, a war, because it is not only affecting non-human animals, but it is affecting this planet. And one thing that I think that we all do that we just don't talk about is when we look at our children, we don't just see the child that we helped to create. I look at my child and I look at my children and I imagine what their children are going to look like and be like. And I imagine what their children's children are going to look like and be like and what they're going to have to go through. So it's really important to me that we set the stage right now. And that involves confronting our adversaries. So I share the genesis of the Civil War in the 1800s because, by all accounts, we are the protagonists of a modern-day civil war to free animals from slavery, to free them from torture, to free them from murder, from rape, from exploitation, right? There was one commercial I saw where there was a guy in England, and he walked up to these 2 young kids, and he asked them, he said, "Hey, do you guys drink milk?" And they said, "Yes." He said, "Okay, well, you're still drinking breast milk then, huh?" And then they said, "No, what are you talking about?" And he says, "Well, that's what cow's milk is." And you could see one of the kids, they got it. It was just an aha moment for them. And the reason why I bring this up is because it is so rooted in our culture, in our tradition, in our habits, that most people don't even know that this war is going on. Most people don't know that millions and billions of innocent creatures are being killed every single minute. And that is the worst type of war that we can ever see. There are a lot of parallels, though, from what you see, what we saw then and what we see now. An irresistible cause, where we wanted to end human slavery, and now we want to end all slavery. And when you think about it, now, I've actually talked to people about this, and they laugh at me. And then I say to them, "You're laughing about me wanting to evolve? You really think that that's funny? Or you really think that, why are you so angry with me?" And believe me, I've received, when I ran for president, I never thought that I would receive so much hate mail about wanting to save animals. I never thought that someone would be so mad at me for suggesting that human beings can evolve, right? Of course, our movement is opposed by those in power, just like it was for the Civil War back in the day. And ultimately, just like abolishing human slavery coalesced into the Republican Party, so did it for the United States and the Humane Party. And I'm so proud to be a part of that. We finally ran our first presidential race in 2016 with some guy named Clifton Roberts. And the vice presidential candidate was also a vegan. Her name was Dr. Breeze Harper, 11-year vegan. Yay, yeah, I'm a huge fan of Dr. Harper. So I remember I followed Dr. Harper when the board of directors, hi Stacy, she's on the board. When the board of directors nominated me, the first thing I did was I called my mom and I said, Mommy, I still call her Mommy. I said, Mommy, the Humane Party actually wants me to run for president. What do you think about that? And you saw that picture, right? She's still little, talks with her accent, smartest woman I know. She said, do it, of course. I'll never forget that when the first time I ran for president and I was following Breeze, I Facebook messaged her and I said, Dear Dr. Harper, I seriously hope you will consider being my vice presidential running mate. And her response was this message meant for me? And I said, yes, absolutely. So we ended up talking. She thought about it. It took her about 2 months to think about it, and ultimately she said yes. So yeah, we ran our very first race, and in 1860, the Republicans achieved political victory. We want to do that as soon as possible. Now, there's one thing I want to assure you guys of. When I run in 2020, and then if we lose, I'll run in 2024, if the Humane Party will have me and nominate me. Hopefully by then, we will have primaries for the Humane Party. Then when I run in 2028, I will have had a lot of practice. And guess what? I will still be younger than Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton was now. Finally, we need to get the job done, and that's one of the reasons why I'm running for Senate. You know, people, I've been approached and asked why I don't run for local office. Believe me, it's a thought. I mean, I know my wife is sometimes, I think so much about what I can do politically to get involved. I've been writing for Veg News. I mean, anything I can do. If I can win mayor, I've even tried to be on the school board. You know, maybe I can influence what is served at lunch. So I'm going to do it. But to get the job done, there's certain things we need to do, and I'm going to talk to you about that in just a second. So I stated earlier that Abe Lincoln won the election, and in the 20 years I've lived a vegan lifestyle, I've never, ever seen another political party with a platform explicitly dedicated to the full rights and equal treatment of animals. And plain and simple, it's the reason I chose to volunteer for the Humane Party. And as a student of America's past, I realized that we can today parallel history if we all dedicate our efforts to achieving this goal. And one of the ways we can do this is run for office, and I'll talk to you about this. Now, you may think, what are you talking about run for office? I mean, you know, what we need is when we propose, like, for example, the Abolition Amendment, when we propose any type of legislation, it's easy to do that, but if we do not have the friends in Congress to help us champion that bill, then it's a moot point. So although it is a seemingly daunting task, we possess, number one, our compassionate intelligence, and you'll hear me refer to compassionate intelligence a lot. And two, some pretty remarkable numbers in our favor, right? So think about it. All we need to win is to have 2/3 of the House of Representatives and 2/3 of Senate. That's less than 400 people who think like you and me. If we have those 400 people in congressional offices, then it's easier when we develop proposed legislation for it to pass. So we can no longer allow selfish, unintelligent, illogical, non-compassionate, and selfish people to continue to represent us. That's why I encourage, it's not just about me, I encourage in any talk that I give, I encourage all of you to run for office. This is one of the quotes that actually inspired me. Dwight D. Eisenhower once said that politics ought to be the part-time profession of every citizen who would protect the rights and privileges of free people and who would preserve what is good and fruitful in our national heritage. Now, if you agree with the overall vision and mission of the Humane Party as I do, there might be some facets of Dwight D. Eisenhower that you may not have agreed with. However, I think the spirit and logic of what he's saying here is very commendable. So I'm going to revolutionize what he said. And I would say that citizen politics is a worthwhile part-time profession for all citizens who would protect the rights and privileges of all sentient beings and who seek to preserve what is good and fruitful in our national heritage. So, thank you, thank you. So we're calling for ending inhumane, scientifically indefensible, and economically unsound exploitation of other species by humans, which includes the elimination of the torture, mutilation, and slaughter of these beings, period. And how are we going to do that? Well, we've already proposed the Abolition Amendment. We're calling for abolishing the property status of and emancipating other animals by either explicitly recognizing all other animals as fully protected individuals under the 13th Amendment, prohibition of slavery, or ratifying a new constitutional amendment emancipating all other animals through proposed constitutional amendments like the Abolition Amendment that you see here. If you go to humaneparty.org, you'll see the language and the rhetoric that has been developed over the last 4 years that I've been dealing with the Humane Party. We've just fine-tuned this language, but it's a beautiful amendment, and we cannot get it passed without people in Congress. I love the Humane Party because it's the first party that has a different vision of our Constitution. You know, I remember when my mom, who was in Korea, she came here, she was so proud of, marrying a U.S. citizen and having a child that is now considered a U.S. citizen. And so she became a U.S. citizen at a very, very young age. She studied hard, and she taught herself English. She taught herself to read and write English. I think that's so amazing, given that she left her country when she was 15 years old. And one of the things she used to do with me is we used to watch Schoolhouse Rock. And that's how I learned the preamble to the Constitution, right? It was a song, and I actually taught it to my children, and they know the preamble to the Constitution. And one of the things that happened to me when I was talking to my daughter about the preamble to the Constitution, which is basically lays out what the Constitution means, what it's going to talk about, is the reference to people. We, the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote general, all of that, it was referring to human beings. But when you think about the contributions that all animals have made to the building of this country, it's important that when we refer to people, we are referring to all people, all individuals, including non-human animals. Now, I have about 5 minutes left, I think. I did say I'm going to talk about the future. And I really wanted to think of a way to position this with you folks so that it would resonate. And it made me think of a conversation that I had at work. And who was it that said, convert my fellow colleagues at Intel to vegan? And it's such a paradox, because literally I work with some of the most brilliant minds on the planet to have developed this little silicon-based computer chip out of sand and water and diamonds. And yet they cannot grasp sometimes the concept of compassion. It amazes me. And so one time I was having this conversation. I went down to, we have 2 cafes in the Folsom Intel facilities. It's a huge campus. And we have 2 cafes, And I went down there and had lunch with some colleagues. And one of my colleagues said to me, "Oh man, how long have you been vegan again?" I said, "Oh, about 19 years at that time." 19 years. He's like, "Whew, couldn't do it, man. Just can't do it." I was like, "Yeah, you can. Just think about the animals, think about your health." "Well, I respect it, but can't do it." I was like, "Let me ask you a question. If for any reason, which I think it's becoming imminent, if for any reason we need to embark on space travel for the demise of our planet, which, by all scientific signs, it's coming, right? If for any reason that happens, and let's say your children or your grandchildren end up having to go into space, what would you advise them to do? Would you advise your children and your grandchildren to go find 50 chickens, 10 pigs, 1 cow, and 200 fish to eat and run out in space? Or would you advise them to bring some seeds and some plants into space, eat and repeat? Eat and repeat. And then he was quiet for just a second. No one's ever put it to me like that before. I think I'm going to give this a try. I said, "Absolutely, and I'm here for you. As a matter of fact, we have a vegan group at work. And if you ever need any help, let me know, and I will be glad to help you." Like many of you, I'm sure, my wife and I have actually converted or helped to convert or help bring light to a lot of people that, just never thought that they would be able to do it. So, that's what I wanted to talk about with the future. The future of politics is a political party or politicians that understand that the most ethical path is also the most practical path. That when you act ethically in all respects, that practically everything else falls into place. Our health, the health of this planet, our relationships with each other, our relationships with animals. I made an analogy once on a show called Vegan Nation with Marlene Narrow. I don't know if you haven't checked out her radio show, it's awesome. She always has these amazing guests. And I told her, I said, imagine if we looked at economies of scale and we looked at an island, and on this island, there were 100 people on one island, and there were 100 people on another island. On this island, everyone just floated around, planting seeds, eating plants, fruits and vegetables, rolling around and frolicking with non-human animals. And on the other island, it's mass murder, they're killing. It's just obvious what island is going to do a lot better. That's if the United States was 100 people. So I truly believe that this lifestyle is the future, and the Humane Party, we've given compassion a chance. We have tried to talk about compassion to people. We've tried to speak to people's hearts. We've tried to speak to their minds. And I think now is the time to pass laws. And not just at a state level, but at the national level. And that's why I am involved with the Humane Party. So my call to action, I mentioned this earlier. I think that, I never had planned to be a politician. So I'm going along in life, graduated from Berkeley, had some children, got married, working in corporate America, and I got tired of what was going on in politics, and I joined a political party, and never in a million years would I have imagined that the board of directors for this party would have said, "Hey, why don't you run for president?" And me do it. And so I can tell you that it is a scary thing to jump into, but when you think about the way that you can immortalize your efforts, the way that any political party can immortalize their efforts to save this planet and to save non-human animals, and then therefore save your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, because it's going to be a better place for them, run for office, please. Whether it's federal, state, local, or municipals or municipalities or school, please run. You have nothing to lose but to lose. That's as I always say, right? And if you do lose, try again, okay? One of the things that I feared was, gosh, if I run for president, obviously, this is a very small party. We were signed, we did not qualify for one ballot, but what we did qualify for was write-in. And believe it or not, I was getting emails and letters and calls from hundreds of thousands of people that told me that they vote. Every state that I've ever gone to recently, someone has come up to me and say, hey, Clifton Roberts, I voted for you. It gives me shivers now to think about it. So let's just try it. Let's go and do it, and let's get better at it. Just like, I grew up studying martial arts from the age of 4 under a great man named Fusei Kisei on the island of Okinawa. I know it sounds like Mr. Miyagi type stuff, but it literally was. Like, my mom met this guy who had a crush on her. She was married, of course, but he was one of the biggest influences in my life. And I started studying with him at 4 years old, and I didn't get a black belt until I was 14. And he taught me the art of fighting without fighting. He taught me how to stand with justice and honor and to talk your way out of a fight. And one thing he taught me was that if you fall, you will get up. So that I encourage you, please run for office, and please support those like me or Robert Mason of Texas, who's running for House of Representatives, representing the Humane Party, by the way. Vote for them again. And one more thing I have to say. We have a nice platform, all-encompassing. There may be 1 or 2 planks that you don't agree with. Don't let that be the reason that you do not support the Humane Party. Because compared to the alternatives, right, there are many parts of their planks that you will not agree with. And if you do not agree with a particular position or plank of the Humane Party, let's come and talk to us about it. We have policy team meetings every week, board of directors that we can talk to, so I encourage you to do it. Second call to action, spend time to really learn about your elected officials, what what they represent, what their personal and business interests are. Really get to know them, and it's their job and it's their duty to answer your questions. So I hope that I will earn your vote this coming election for United States Senate, and I really thank you for inviting me to come and speak with you today. Okay, I only have 2 minutes. If there are any questions or anything like that, I know it's been a very long day, but I'll take some. Yes?
I have a question. Vegans and vegetarians are such a minority. Like, what are you doing to really talk to people who aren't vegan or vegetarian, maybe aren't on board with all the animal
Yes.
slavery, abortions,
Yes.
or abolition, sorry.
Yeah. What's your name?
Ilana?
Hi, Ilana. So that is a fantastic question, and I think the common denominator for me is healthcare. Given the very personal experience I had with my father, and the knowledge I have about our international coding of disease system, and CPT is also the procedural. It's called current procedural terminology. There's a lot that I learned about healthcare, and I think that there is a common thread, and there's more science coming out now. This is going to be amazing. If you go to the CDC's website, Center for Disease Control, they actually admit on there that some of the largest causes of deaths in our country is the consumption of meat. They don't say it in those words, but the science is making itself evident, but they don't ever say it's because you eat this animal or this animal. So definitely approaching those people that are sick, that are diseased, Distressed is one strategy. The other strategy is looking at the other planks. That's what I loved about the logic of the Humane Party, is you can approach other people that believe in eliminating the death penalty, that believe in eliminating GMOs, especially for animals. I know GMOs are a hot topic, but animals don't have a say. Like, if an animal came up to me and said, hey, I want you to genetically modify me, then yeah. But the animals don't tell me that. And so I feel like no other human should speak on their behalf and say, yeah, they should be genetically modified. But there are other planks. And so if you go to humaneparty.org and you look at the other planks, there's ways to start conversations based on those planks. So that's how I plan to do it. Yes.
You were talking about, like, say, eliminating a slaughterhouse. And I'm all for doing that, but are you proposing, do you have any plan in place for how to get the slaughterhouse owner to transition into an honest job?
It's interesting you say that. So one of the things that I've enjoyed recently is the economic transition team of the Humane Party. A gentleman named Jimmy Valdez, Jorge Sigler, you actually started on the economic transition team. I don't think he's involved with the party too much now, but we have an entire policy team that has come up. And as a matter of fact, I think one of them just won an award. So if you go to humaneparty.org, then you go to the Humane Herald. There was recently some papers and white papers published on the transition requirements or the economic transition requirements in situations just like that. So we can, that would be like a 2-hour conversation now, but I encourage you to go there and look at some of the data that they've come up with and some of the proposed solutions they've come up with.